Let's look at how we can use setInterval to create a timer that you typically see on something like Live Nation or Ticketmaster. So I have a span set up with the text inside of it of 1 minute. What I want to do is every single second I want to run a function that will basically decrement the total number of seconds and take this time from 1 minute to 0. So how do we go about accomplishing this? I'm going to start by creating a variable called timeLeft. And this will equal the total number of seconds that we want to start from, and we're going to continually decrease this all the way down to 0. So we'll say 60 seconds times how many minutes? Well, in this case, 1 minute. Let's also grab a reference to this span element, since we're going to have to continually update this every single second. So I can call this L, short for element. You can call it whatever you want. I will do document get element by ID time remaining. Okay, so now let's set up our setInterval function. I will say var timer ID. If you remember, just like from setTimeout, setInterval also returns some type of identifier that can be used to cancel a interval. So I'll call setInterval, this global function on the window object, and we're going to pass it a function that we want to run continuously. How frequent do we want to run this function? Well, in this case, every single 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. Okay, so we have our setInterval set up, and every single second I basically want to decrement this timeLeft variable. So how do we go and do that? Well, I'm going to say timeLeft is equal to timeLeft minus 1. So it starts off at 60 seconds, and every single second we're going to continuously update this and subtract 1. And then the last thing that we need to do is say, let's rewrite this value to this span input. So we'll say, or span element. We'll say L.innerHTML is equal to timeLeft. And if we look at this, we can see that it gets constantly updated. What if we wanted this in a different format? Rather than just being a numeric output, let's just say we want it in the form of 1 minute, 0:00, and then 0:59, 0:58, so on. So we need to figure out the number of minutes and seconds individually. I'm going to create variables for each of these, so minutes and seconds, and I'll just put this at the top and just consider it a best practice. And the number of minutes is going to be the time left, and we're going to divide that by 60. So let's actually change this. Instead of saying 1 minute, let's take this to 2. I'll update the span so it starts off at 2. And you can see that it starts off at 2 minutes, 2:00, and it decrements to the number of seconds. So we actually want it to be, we need to figure out how many minutes are left. So the way we do that is, if we take the total time left, which is in seconds, and divide by 60, then we're getting some type of decimal number. We don't really care about the decimal because we just want the minutes portion. So we can use another function called parseInt, and that basically takes a decimal number and will cut off all the decimal values and just give us the actual integer portion. Okay, so we have the minutes. Let's go ahead and change this. We're going to set the inner HTML equal to minutes, and we're going to add concatenate a colon, and we'll also concatenate the seconds later on. Okay, so that looks good. Now let's figure out the actual number of seconds. So the seconds is a little bit different, but we're going to use something called the modulus operator, and that basically says, let's get the remainder by, we're going to divide time left by 60, and we want that remainder portion. That remainder portion is basically the number of seconds left. So we want that as the value for seconds. So I will say time limit, and if we were, oh sorry, it should be time left. And if we take time left, normally we would do divide by 60, and that would give us the number of minutes, but in this case we want the remainder of dividing by 60. So we will say modulus 60, and that basically gives us the remainder. Alright, so we have seconds, and we can concatenate that onto the string. Alright, so we have time left modulus 60. And it looks like I have 3 warnings. Forgot the concatenate plus sign. Alright, so that looks good. Now there's one little small thing that we have to add. If the time limit or the time remaining is less than or equal to 0, we want to kind of stop the timer because we don't want it to say -1, -2. That wouldn't really make sense in a real world situation. So how can we fix that? We can say if the time left is less than or equal to 0, let's go ahead and clear that interval. So just like with clear timeout, there is clear interval. And we can say clear interval and pass it this timer ID that we get back when we actually create the interval. Now there's one other thing that I want to do, and I want to say if the actual number of seconds, say this part that keeps being decremented, if it's less than 2 digits long, we don't want it to say 1:9. That wouldn't really make sense for 1 minute 9 seconds. We want it to say 1:09, since that's typically how you'd see it. So we need to kind of add on that starting 0 to seconds that basically are less than 2 digits long. So how do we do that? Well, we need to figure out the length of the number of seconds. So we need some way of converting this seconds into a string. And the way we can do that, just one approach, is to use this string function. And we could say we're going to pass in the number of seconds to the string function. So it will take this number, turn it into a string representation of this number. And now we can access the length of it. So we can say if the length is equal to 1, let's go ahead and concatenate or prefix the seconds variable with a 0. So we can say seconds is equal to the string 0, since we don't want to do actual math. We want to say 0 plus seconds, and we'll get back a string. So I'll fast forward a little bit, and we can see that seconds will be prefixed by 0 when we get into 1:09, 1:08, and so on.